Hi everyone, hope you're all doing well. This is going to be a long video that isn't just a stream. So feel free to watch it in parts, or if you're like me and you like to do something as you watch a long video, feel free to draw along, play a video game, have your lunch, your dinner, get a hot drink, whatever you like. I'll try to speak as much as I can through this video, but I really hope you enjoy it, and let's just jump into this process. So, this whole thing is a process of a commission that I recently got of this very beautiful ethereal character who's sitting in this kind of secret garden area. I've worked with this client before actually. They had asked me to do this long strip form comic with the same character who is constantly surrounded by butterflies, fairy-like imagery. It's all very, very magical. It's all very beautiful. I really enjoyed doing that first commission for them. So when they returned to me with this idea, I jumped at the opportunity to do another thing for them. But that whole kind of like divine almost mood was to be captured again in this piece, which they had specified they wanted me to do in watercolor. So before it was a digital commission that I did for them, this time it is a traditional piece. So you can see here, I'm doing some very loose sketching first of all, following the description that I was given, which was based on this garden statue. I have a little kind of image of it there in the top left, which is apparently a very popular statue, a garden statue that people like to use where my client is from. So it's very elegant, it has a lot of flowing lines, it's very feminine. So that was my starting point. And I did all of this on my iPad, on Procreate, which I find is really useful for doing stuff like this. Like, I can make mistakes and erase things more easily. I mean, like, obviously anybody who does digital art knows the convenience of it compared to traditional art. I don't feel like there's as much pressure to get everything right straight away. It's very forgiving. Digital drawing is very, very forgiving. And it's usually like how I like to prepare for any kind of a commission, whether it's an illustration like this or if it's a portrait, even if it's something that I'm doing for myself personally. A lot of the time I will start it, sketch it in Procreate, and then maybe do some color tests or whatever. I mean, like, it's not a unique system or way of doing things, but you know, it is very useful. So I'll do the sketch on Procreate, and then once it's been approved, then I'll transfer it to some paper and I will work on the final piece from there. So it's funny, I was saying on this stream around this time that like I'd never really drawn benches before. I didn't have a reason to, and then this is the second time this year I've actually been commissioned to do something that had a bench in it. So I don't know what the fascination with benches is at the moment, but anyway, this one is a little bit more fantastical than the first one that I did, which was a rose pattern, which then tied into the kind of the theme of the garden behind her. Here I'm just doing some color tests to try and kind of I had an idea from the beginning of what kind of colors I wanted to use, but I thought it would probably be better to try a few very, very loose color compositions just to see if anything else worked better. So this one was very much focused mainly on like blues and greens and purples and pinks a little bit, which is actually the color scheme that I ended up going with in the end. But then I think afterwards I do a more green toned, like a warm green toned thumbnail, and then I think one which is a little bit more pink. But you know, thankfully the client agreed with me. This first iteration was the better one. It kind of captured that fairy-like quality better than the others, I think. and then all of the butterflies that are very synonymous with this character as well. I'm not even doing the colour thumbnails properly. I just shifted the colours on saturation mode, and then that was it. I did stream the preparatory sketching on one day and stream the initial test painting on another. And the unfortunate part is it totally slipped my mind to actually save that second stream. And by the time I actually remembered to, I couldn't retrieve it anymore, which is something I'm really embarrassed about. And it was really stupid of me, and I was very sorry about it. And the only consolation I have really is that the client was actually able to watch the entire stream from beginning to end as it happened. But this is the result of that preparatory stream. Very, very loose colours with my watercolour. Yeah. This is all that I have of it, I'm afraid. And I also had started on the main painting. I had just got base colours down, nothing too much, but you can see it here. This is kind of where I was at when I started filming properly. So I'm very sorry that I don't have all of that extra footage, but hopefully the absence of it doesn't affect the video too much. Now, okay, with regards to the painting, I'm the first to mention that despite having many watercolours and enjoying using them from time to time, I'm not actually very used to using them. I kind of think that I just like collecting colours, which is something that I do in general with all types of art materials. I just like to collect them, and I'll always convince myself that I'll use them loads, and then I don't, and then they just sit in my drawers for God knows how long, and I'll just look at them from time to time and admire them and be happy that I have them, but just not use them. So I have quite a few watercolour sets, but I just don't use them a whole lot. I'm much more familiar with media like acrylic gouache or inks, or, you know, just plain pencil and paper in my sketchbook. So I did mention to the client that I'm not as adept as I would like to be at watercolour, but we did agree that it would probably still look the best, as it's a great type of paint for exactly what we were trying to capture, you know, because of the soft qualities that watercolour typically has. And I was kindly given free rein to experiment a little and try and find a way to use the paint. Try to find a way to use the paint in a way that I was comfortable with. I typically like to work with very strong and bright colours, so I think I was able to use the watercolour in a way that was rich and vibrant, but still had that kind of dreamy quality to it. I think so anyway, and you know, like, spoilers, but the client was happy with it as well, with the results. So that's the main thing. Which then, I guess, you know, I should really talk about the materials I used. Mainly I was using the Gansai Tambi watercolours by Kuretake, which are some of my favourite watercolours to use because the pigment quality is so good. One of the biggest differences with how they act compared to Western watercolours is their consistency, because I think the binder in them is just a little bit different. I couldn't tell you exactly what the binder is because I couldn't find a definitive answer online when I was researching it, so I can't even tell you what exactly it is, because I was actually trying to find out if they were vegan, in case people would have been interested by that, but I did not find anything kind of solid on that, so I'm sorry. But either way, whatever binder is used, it makes the paint almost a little bit like a gouache, which, like I said, I'm more used to using. So, you know, but then they can still dilute to very soft, very kind of gentle colours like most watercolours can. So I actually find them quite versatile in that way. Like, in my personal opinion, I never really warmed to watercolour paintings that much, because I always found that they looked quite dull. Then again, a lot of the watercolours that I have seen in the past have usually been kind of like landscapes, which, you know, to be honest, I have not really seen any kind of watercolour landscape that's really kind of lit a fire in me and I've been like, wow, watercolour's amazing. But That's because, like I said, I tend to gravitate towards brighter palettes. So that's where the Gansai Tambi really shone. They're the best of both worlds for me. I like them a lot. They're really nice. I was also painting on some regular cold pressed 300 gram watercolor paper, but I can't remember which brand it is because the cover is gone, and I'm 95% sure that it's by Hanamulla and that it's just a mixed media pad. The paper is acid free, it's light resistant, which is all good stuff. The light resistant part, I'm not honestly sure how that'll affect the paint, because watercolor in general is very good at not being water resistant, which is why old watercolors are usually hung in like dark spaces in like galleries and stuff. But I mean, like, I'm pretty certain that having light resistant paper will help somewhat with the longevity of the paint. So if that's something of interest, it might be worth looking into if anyone is considering using watercolors. So here I'm just detailing, doing very loose detailing, because I tend to finish off all of that kind of aspect of painting with like pencils, which I will talk about in a little while. I am just kind of trying to build on the gradients, on the kind of the magical colouring of the background, trying to capture that soft light that could come through like a garden. Like, I don't really know how else to describe it. It's a very kind of like soft, ethereal, dreamy light. I always like images with that kind of lighting where it's behind a character and it's just softly lighting them from behind, and they look very kind of, you know, warm toned. It's very much like a golden glow. So I'm trying to kind of build up the layers darker towards the front, so it really looks like the back of the painting is really kind of, yeah, glowing. The brush I'm using, I believe, is I can't even remember. I can't remember the brand of it, but I know it's a half synthetic and it's a half sable brush. It's a watercolor brush. But, you know, that being said, to be honest, I've never had a problem with pure synthetic brushes. I find they work just as well. I just happen to have this one, so I was just using it because it's one of the smallest ones that I have. But yeah, synthetic brushes will do the job just fine. This was just good to get into all of those little nooks and crannies and to get all of those tiny little blades of grass. So here I'm using, it is still a watercolor. It's actually a watercolor ink, the Ecoline inks, which I'm currently obsessed with at the moment. They're still technically watercolor, I suppose, because they they're not light fast, they reactivate when they're wet, but the concentration of the colour is just so beautiful. Like, I can't sing its praises enough. I love this ink. It's ink, but they just add that really saturated kind of pop of colour. I really, really like how they look. I've been messing around so much with them recently. I've bought myself a whole new batch for Christmas on behalf of like some family members. That's going to be their Christmas present to me. I'm really excited to get them. It is, again, one of the issues with them, the whole light fastness thing. It is something that I would really encourage people to look into if they are tempted to work with watercolors. It's not as serious as it sounds, but you do still have to be careful, because you don't want to put so much time and effort into a watercolor piece and then just have it like fade over time. It is something to do your research on, because, yeah, like I said, I'm not particularly used to working with watercolors, so it's something that I had to kind of refresh myself on as well. But it's very, very worth using them because it's such a beautiful material to use. the way they'll bleed into each other is gorgeous. Especially with these Ecoline inks now, they're so, I can't even really describe how satisfying it is to watch them bleed into each other, and they'll leave a smooth colour, I suppose, but I guess it just depends on how you like apply it to the page. Sometimes they'll pool and you'll have these kind of like splotchy stains, which I personally really like. I know a lot of people don't like when it's not like a completely uniform colour, but that's one of the things about watercolour that I do actually like. You can see kind of here in the foliage, in the kind of the purple shadowy kind of areas, the light and the darks really just kind of bleed into each other, and I love that. I really, really like how that looks, and I love layering on top of gradients like that. So I'm just adding more detail, just layering more and more, blending more colours into the background, and that's the thing, because if you re-wet watercolour, you can reactivate it and you can blend it into the new material that you're putting on top. So it's a very unpredictable material to use, but it's really fun. And if you tend to just draw or paint with acrylics or oils and you're kind of tempted into trying like watercolors sometime, go for it. Like I said, I'm not that adept at using them, and it's really just kind of like what you make of them, I suppose, but it's very, very satisfying to use. I don't know if I'm selling it really very well, but hopefully kind of like I'm pleased with how this picture came out, so I hope that in itself will maybe convince maybe a couple of you to try watercolors sometime. So now I'm on to just filling in the character. My idea for her was to keep her quite simple in terms of the detail compared to the background. I really put like a lot of texture, I suppose, into the foliage and the leaves and the flowers and everything, and I really wanted to keep her simple enough so that she would really stand out compared to everything, but I still wanted to have, like I was saying, that kind of glowy backlight on her. So I'm just filling her in with like this very light pink wash, layering again with the shadows, making sure everything is well blended, everything kind of like looks very soft and gentle and dreamy. I don't really have that much to kind of say about this part of the painting. It's fairly self-explanatory. I'll just let it go on its own for a little bit, and then I'll get back to you when I'm using the pencils. Now, so here I am back again. I've started to use my colouring pencils on the background. Everything is dry, and this is kind of like the final third, I guess, of the painting. First is the preparatory sketching and the drawings, then the actual painting with all of the base colours, and now is the detailing portion. So these are not all of the colours that I'm using, but they're the main ones. And when everything is done and dry, I move on to adding the details with these Polychromos pencils, which are made by Faber-Castell. This is always my favourite part of any painting because I love the texture that it adds. I love the kind of the graininess that the paper lends to the pencil, and the scribbles and everything that just make the details pop. Everything looks really nice, a little bit extra vibrant. And it's also the point where I start to constantly move around the painting because I'm not very good at working consistently in just one spot until it's finished. And, you know, like if I'm using a colour that needs to go in multiple places, then it just makes more sense for me to jump around. But for the sake of the video, I did try to kind of stick to various spots for at least a little while, so that like cutting everything together wouldn't be as much of a challenge. So it's kind of the same process a little bit as the watercolour. I'm using very, very soft kind of like layers of colour, adding extra details, adding extra like little, I know I keep using pops of colour, but that's like all it is, you know, a little bit of pink here, a little flash of like cerulean blue over here, a really strong vivid green over there. It just brings the painting together very, very well. And the feeling of like everything slowly coming more and more to life, the more kind of colour that you add, it's very satisfying to kind of watch this is generally as well the point in a painting where it's starting to pick back up again. I'll usually get to a point about halfway through where I kind of want to give up and I just don't really like anything that I'm doing in it. And it did happen with this one, but I think that's just kind of like a natural process of doing art in general, especially if you're doing like a big finished painting with lots of detail and everything. There's always going to be a part where you just kind of want to give up and cry a little bit, but this is the point where it picks up a little bit again for me, and I start like really enjoying it, and I love adding all of those little details, and it's just really fun. I love doing it a lot. I find that it just adds like this really satisfying crispness to everything. With the watercolour, like I was saying earlier, everything blends into each other. The colours get very, very soft. There are like very few sharp lines in this particular piece. I know there are watercolour artists who can get very, very sharp lines, but I mean in this particular piece. So I like to use the pencils in a way that kind of bring that sharpness, those edges back in, and you can kind of see a little bit more form to the plants and the foliage and everything. That it's not just some blurry kind of background elements. Like everything, you can see what everything is, or what it's supposed to be at least, and it just kind of adds much more like richness and depth to the background. Here I'm actually adding in a little bit of acrylic gouache, because I'm obsessed with this as well. I know I was talking about the Equaline inks earlier. Acrylic gouache is really something that it's kind of like my main painting material most of the time when I'm doing like big paintings like this. It's even better for adding even sharper lines and more kind of defined shapes. And I always find that like it just adds those stronger details that sometimes paintings like this need. So yeah, I'm just adding some extra little kind of like spots of paint here and there, just to make everything look a little bit more rich. I understand that I'm using the same kind of terminologies all the time, but these are the only words I can think of at the moment. So here is where I start like adding extra layers of colour to the focal point, the character, who is looking very lovely perched on her bench in a way that most people would probably need incredible abs to do. But I really wanted to try and keep that softness to her. So everything is very kind of, the way I'm colouring is very light. I will only use kind of harsher lines for the outlines, just so that she kind of stands out a little bit more from the bulk of her hair, or her arm coming a little bit more forward because it's in front of all the rest of her. Little things like that. And then adding kind of details like reflections of the colours from the foliage in the kind of the underside of her hat and then onto her hair, and all of these little shadows to kind of keep in mind. I'm not honestly the best at this kind of thing, but I do try to kind of think about those things, and you know, like, all you can do is your best, and I still think it worked out, thankfully. One of the problems, which I say with inverted commas, I typically have between the initial sketch of a commission and the final piece is that there's usually an element or two I preferred in the original drawing. Like in my preparatory sketch, the character was surrounded by loads more butterflies, which were all white and glowy, which I really liked how that looked, but I had also had the idea, I proposed the idea to use some gold leaf in the final painting, and I thought it would look really magical and give it an extra kind of richness that, you know, only gold could do. I was kind of thinking about it afterwards. It would mean I'd have to do fewer butterflies, because if she was surrounded by as many as I had put in the original sketch, it would just be too much. It would overpower the focus of the picture, which is her and her immense beauty. It would just be too much. She needs to shine on her own. I think it turned out well in the end, and the gold definitely adds a little sparkle that the white butterflies wouldn't have done. Also, I should say, just so you know, it's only imitation gold leaf that I used. It's not the real thing. It still looks very well. I don't honestly see the difference between it and genuine gold leaf. The only thing you need to be careful of is just it needs an extra layer of varnish to protect it from being tarnished. But it's always so satisfying to peel away the excess foil and then just to see the reveal of the shape underneath. It's very... It's just very satisfying. So I think that's everything that I wanted to mention. This was a really lovely commission to work on. I was really excited to work to do something for this person again, because the first commission that I did was so lovely. I really wanted to do something similar again, and I just love the variety of colours that it ended up with, and that I was able to indulge myself a little bit with the gold leaf. I don't get to do full scenes like this very much, so it was a good challenge, and I feel good about the end result. But you know, let me know if you agree with me, what you think of it. But I am going to leave it at that. Thanks a million, I should say, for watching, and I'll talk to you very, very soon. So thank you again, and bye.